and this with the agreement of the whips of the official opposition and the timing of the original motion, that we should first of all study the documentation, the documents, and then a subcommittee. This is what we find in the blues anyway. Myself and Mr. Genius isn't exactly what's been reflected in the last discussions of Monday last. I think there was a misapprehension with the intent of the motion, so I'd like to try to correct this. There was an agreement on the 10th of April. I believe it was unanimous. We had a consensus. I'd like to reopen our discussion on that issue briefly.
Just your final sentence.
Oui, dans
I'd like to bring some clarification to what was accepted on the 10th of April last, the agreement between the whip of the official opposition party and the other parliamentarians around the table, which was considered to be my amendment, and apparently the blues and what we have in the formal minutes is not the same. So I'd like to get some clarification on the motion as it was amended.
I have that I've been working off of is the one I think we distributed a couple days ago, the one that starts with pursuant to Standing Orders 108, 2, and 3, C, Subcommittee on Government Operations, etc. That goes then A, B, C, D, E, F. And F is the one that ends with, as long as this decision is made before Thursday, June 20th, 2024. Now,
justement,
precisely, that motion, which is found in the minutes, does not reflect what we find in the blues. Now, I said, according to the blues, my amendment would allow us to go to analysis before taking a more in-depth study, which would probably require more documents than what I can now propose. Now we are going to begin our analysis that will look at a generalized situation. We'd have to go into much more detail, be more comprehensive, and have more meetings. Now that's what I said last April the 10th. Now Mr. Genuis's response would be just the formulation would be different, and that, according to paragraph 102, 3, 4, as you said, Mr. Chairman, the committee will demand the production of documents in both official languages. This letter should include all the key elements of the CCFP to the government, the number and value of received by each enterprise, and the list of subcontractors for each contractor, and that this be submitted to the company before the 20th of June 24. We would look at this list of documents and analyze what they have in order to see if we can do a longitudinal examination of the situation, and the decision must be taken before the 20th of June 2024. Mr. Genuis replied, "Thank you, Mr. Chair. We hope to arrive at a consensus. I believe it's important to study these issues, and if this can reassure our MPs, it would begin by a request of documentation, and then we can follow up on what to do in following steps. I'm in favor of this amendment." So there was a consensus on an understanding of what I was trying to present on the basic elements and the content of my request or amendment. But this particular format here of this motion does not reflect that intent.
So we have a couple ways forward here that I see, but everyone can please weigh in. One, your amendment, it was kind of a schmozzle. I don't know how that will translate. Your amendment is actually an out-of-order amendment because it doesn't amend, it completely replaces Mr. Genuis's. At the time, we should have ruled it out of order, but the committee kind of pushed together, as we often do, less formally, kind of a way forward. So it's not perfect. So we have a couple ways forward. One is the subcommittee is not happening because we did not receive names. So the subcommittee is not happening. Yours is kind of we're obviously down our last day. We can actually choose to actually revise this when we come back in September, which will give plenty of time to look at the documents I think you're asking for, and then present a new motion come September, and ignore this and ignore your out of order amendment that we kind of used to push together one complete motion. So we kind of move forward that way if the committee chooses. The other way forward is the committee now can decide on a whole new motion, but we've got the minister in a few minutes. And I'm going to interrupt here. Mr. Anderson, I apologize. Because of late votes, and we've got our next witness coming here at 5:30, we're not going to have any time. So I'm going to ask, let you know we can excuse you, and the intent is we will bring you back at a future date. I hope you are local, but we will bring you back at a future date. The original intent was to write the report over the summer, but I think we will have you back, and then we'll write the report. Then,
just before you do that,
Mr.
Mr.
Chair? Mr. Green.
May I just request through you to the witness that he submit his statement in writing that he has submitted, that be distributed for to be on the record should something happen materially over the summer, or we don't get back to this in time, or what have you.
Yeah, if you'd submit it, and we'll have it translated.
It's got recommendations, I imagine. Yes, perfect.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned you had your opening statement also.
Yes.
Yeah, provide it to us. We'll have it translated, sent out, and then the intent is we'll have you back September or October, and then you can actually read it to us. And we'll give an opportunity for Q&A, and then we'll finish off the candidate post study after that. But we've only got you for about 5 more minutes anyways. I don't think you want to listen to us chat about someone else's motion. So we'll send it to the clerk. We'll have it translated and sent out. It'll go to the analysts as well. And then we'll see you September, October, Mr. Anderson. With my apologies, between the late vote and this, we won't have time to hear from you today. Thanks. Ms. Vignola?
À mon humble avis, Monsieur le Président.
In my humble opinion, Mr. Chair, I really appreciate that the amendment was out of order at that time. It should have been mentioned at that time and rejected out of hand. 10th of April, it was accepted as such by the members of the committee, by the majority of them. And I don't think at this point how many have managed to 6,900 and something documents, but I haven't finished doing my reading. And I imagine it probably the same for the majority of us around this table. Now, to try to decide to establish a subcommittee at this point, I think would be very premature. In my humble opinion, in my experience, I think that we're going to end up, turning in circles here. And we should make sure that these indigenous enterprises should get real benefits. We don't want,
Perhaps reintroduce a whole new motion when we're back in September on this.
C'est en
Because the April 10 one is what our clerk cobbled together, as he often does from our conversations. And that's where we got this one, but we won't be doing the subcommittee because as I said, we're not able to reestablish it. We can put this aside and we will have, with everyone's general agreement, I kind of sense that where we're at, we'll have a whole new motion to do this after the summer.
Si on peut m'assurer
satisfactory?
qu'on ne profitera pas.
As long as we don't take the opportunity or grab the opportunity to set up a subcommittee during the summer, and I wouldn't know anything about it. So, if we could,
Merci.
I'm writing notes now to create a subcommittee for the summer with one member, Mrs. Vignola.
I'm just gonna say, really, I mean, I do recall what Madame Vignola had suggested. I recall that conversation, and we're happy to support her. Sorry?
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
The conversation in April that you're referring to? Thank you, sorry.
And so again, we're ready to support Madame Vignola in terms of her her instruction here.
Well, I think it's, as I suggested, that there would be no subcommittee, and I think I'm hearing that you need some time to go over all these documents, and then either yourself or someone else will submit a new motion come September.
Okay, sounds good.
Is that fair? We're in agreement? One other small thing. I just mentioned about Mr. Anderson. I just want to get everyone's, very good. Just want to get everyone's official approval. As we said, we'd agreed we'd have the analysts write the Canada Post report, and we'll get to it immediately, table immediately in September. That's not going to happen now. I've got a text from Mr. Backrack. He's fine. We'll wait till we're back. We'll hear a couple more witnesses. One who we weren't able to get into contact for today, and Mr. Anderson. So if everyone's fine, we will do that instead of writing the report over the summer, and we'll write it in September, October. Are we fine with that, everyone? Wonderful. And we're going to suspend to bring in Minister Anand. So we'll spend for a couple minutes. Anand, welcome back. And Mr. Matthews, welcome back to OGGO. I think this is your 18th department you've been with us at OGGO. Minister Anand, the floor is yours for 5 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that the lands on which we are gathered are part of the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe peoples. Suis accompagnée aujourd'hui avec des fonctionnaires de mon ministère.
I'm accompanied this afternoon with officials from my department who can give you further details.
$12 billion in incremental budgetary spending, which reflects $11.2 billion to be voted and a $1.5 billion increase in forecast statutory expenditures. Permettez-moi de souligner maintenant trois.
Allow me to highlight 3 requests in particular, Mr. Chairman. First, no relationship is more important to Canada than our relationship with Indigenous peoples. A part of that relationship is righting the wrongs of the past. The Department of Aboriginal Services or Indigenous Services is seeking $2.2 billion. We also understand the need to protect newcomers to provide them with much-needed support services. To this end, the Department of Citizenship and Immigration is requesting $951.5 million.
Reduced greenhouse gas emissions, the Department of Transport is seeking $604.9 million to provide purchase incentives for zero-emission vehicles. This top-up funding was announced in Budget 2024 to help Canadians make the shift to cleaner, zero-emission vehicles. In total, approximately $1.6 billion of the funding in these supplementary estimates is for initiatives included in this year's budget. Les autres fonds annoncés dans le...
The other funds announced in the 2024 budget will be presented in future budget documents. And before concluding, Mr. Chairman, I also wanted to mention a few other recent initiatives and updates. First, the government has reached a tentative agreement with the Public Service Alliance of Canada for the Border Services Group. Once ratified, this agreement will apply to approximately 11,000 members of the Public Service Alliance of Canada and demonstrates the best deals are made at the bargaining table. On the 22nd of May, I released the Government of Canada's first ever integrated cybersecurity strategy. This strategy outlines a proactive, whole-of-government approach to protect government systems, safeguarding Canadians' information, and strengthening the resilience of digital government. In addition, on May 29th, Treasury Board Secretariat announced measures to strengthen managerial accountability by adding mandatory procedures when acquiring professional services. Finally, Mr. Chairman, on the 13th of June, I announced that the government will introduce important legislation this fall to extend early retirement eligibility to frontline public servants who consistently help to keep Canadians safe. The Government of Canada is committed to supporting public servants responsible for protecting the safety and security of Canadians. The proposed pension benefits would apply to several occupational groups such as firefighters, paramedics, correctional service employees, parliamentary protection officers, and search and rescue technicians. Thank you for your time, Mr. Chairman. My officials and myself are now prepared to answer your questions with pleasure.
Alors, quand vous dites vos questions, j'espère que vous référez à moi. Merci beaucoup. Nous allons commencer avec Madame Cossy pour 6 minutes. Merci Madame la Ministre d'être venue devant nous. Madame la ministre, est-ce que vous êtes d'accord que votre gouvernement se retrouve dans une situation de dette, de crise de dette? Je ne suis pas d'accord avec cette déclaration. Un instant, s'il vous plaît.
We're having the French translation coming in English.
I think we got it figured out.
Wait.
That's Dr. Time, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Minister, would you agree that your government has found itself in a debt crisis?
I do not agree with that statement. No, we have a lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G7 and a AAA credit rating by an independent rating organization. And the Bank of Canada is lowering interest rates because of our sound fiscal position.
Would you agree that it's a problem that the government paid more on servicing debt than what was paid in healthcare?
I believe that the very heart of our democracy is about helping the most vulnerable in our country. Pharmacare, dental care, the Canada Child Benefit, and $10 a day child care supports for seniors. Those are examples of the way you help the most vulnerable in our country, and that is exactly what our government is doing.
Well, it appears to me that all new spending by your government could have been covered by the amount that your government has in fact serviced the debt with. But your government seems to have decided that the only way to solve your debt crisis is to increase the capital gains inclusion rate. Do you not think it would be more effective if you simply created a plan to enforce actual decreases in spending?
I would like to say that there's a philosophical difference between the party of my honorable colleague and our party and the government's role. We believe in helping the most vulnerable in our country and doing that in a fiscally responsible way. At the same time, at the Treasury Board of Canada, I have led a spending review which is on track to find $15 billion over 5 years and $4.8 billion every year thereafter. So we do believe in fiscal prudence. We also believe in helping the most vulnerable in our country.
Yeah, yet your new spending amount this year is actually 3.5 times the amount that you are attempting to find just in this single fiscal year alone. Minister, I'm afraid I disagree with you relative to your position in your government having a debt crisis. I think your government absolutely has a debt crisis, and I think it's evident by the fact that your prime minister has spent more than any other prime minister in history. In fact, your government has spent so much that you had to bring in this job-killing tax. And this is a tax that affects Canadians far beyond what your prime minister has claimed, your deputy prime minister has claimed, and I believe you're claiming here today. It hurts farmers, it hurts healthcare workers, it hurts small businesses. And I know that the deputy prime minister has said that this will only affect 0.013%. So given that confident statement by the Deputy Prime Minister, will you yourself, as the President of the Treasury Board, the individual who's responsible for all of the spending, since I do believe this is a spending problem which has brought your government to bring in this job-killing tax, will you commit today on behalf of your government to bring an amendment to the capital gains tax, ensuring that the 99.08% of Canadians that your government says are not affected by this tax will not be impacted? Will you make that commitment to bringing that amendment today? Minister, please.
I will not be making an amendment suggestion relating to our government's attempt to ensure tax fairness for our country, to ensure that we are helping the most vulnerable. In fact, I would encourage my honourable colleague, if you truly care about the most vulnerable in our country, perhaps vote in favour of items like dental care for all, child care, benefits, as well as pharmacare. Those are initiatives that will help Canadian families and in fact have enabled 85% of women between the ages of 25 and 45 to join the workforce post-pandemic. Making the tax system fair for all generations is a priority for our government, and we will continue to execute on that priority.
Yep, thank you for that, Minister. Minister, if you will not listen to me, Will you possibly consider the words of your predecessor, the Honorable Scott Bryson, who, of course, sat in your seat, is very esteemed, who recently referred to the higher taxation and bigger government you and your government have created as socialist bafflegap, and that it reflects the sort of advice offered to ministers who don't know any better. Would you promise to the committee today that you will consider the words of your predecessor, please?
What I will continue to do in this position and any other is to ensure that I'm representing my constituents as well as serving the people of Canada in my role as the Treasury Board President. That means executing on our government's responsibilities and prudently managing the public purse, and we will continue to do this with initiatives like the Refocus Government Spending Initiative that I mentioned earlier. Again, there's a philosophical difference between the party opposite and our government will continue to stand up for Canadians, Canadian families, Canadian workers.
I
as
agree.
well
There is a
as senior
philosophical
citizens.
difference, Minister. You will not commit on behalf of your government. You will not listen to your predecessors, but will you commit today that you will include in your platform, in your leadership bid, as you go and attempt to be the leader of your party, that you will include an exemption for these individuals I've mentioned with the capital gains tax? Will you commit that today?
I would like to refute the premise of the question, Mr. Chair. There is no such initiative underway that my honorable colleague is mentioning. In fact, it is quite preposterous that you are mentioning that in this committee when I am here to testify about the work of the Treasury Board of Canada. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Sousa, please.
Thank you, Minister, for being here. Can we just touch upon some of what was just discussed about this your Refocus Government Spending Initiative and how it's complementary to these supplementary statements and estimates, I should say? Basically, does the initiative, are they cutting programs and services to Canadians? Or can it ensure growth in services and fiscal prudence as we go forward?
Well, thank you for the question. I do want to highlight further the work that we are doing on Refocus Government Spending. Phase 1 of that initiative was outlined in Budget 2023, and as soon as I became the President of the Treasury Board, I undertook that initiative, which is to refocus government spending towards our government's priorities. In the supplementary B estimates table last fall, we began to report on the first block of those savings with reductions of $500 million, as well as further reductions in the main estimates. That $500 million was broken down into reductions in outsourcing or third-party contracting, $350 million and $150 million on executive travel. And then again, in the main estimates, I provided further information relating to the way in which we were refocusing spending towards our government's priorities. And those two phases are going to deliver on the government's commitment to refocus $15.8 billion over 5 years and $4.8 billion every year thereafter. Phase 2 of the Refocus Government Spending Initiative was outlined in this year's budget. And you will see us taking further initiatives to ensure the prudent management of taxpayer dollars. Thank you.
Thank you. And in describing the process and the creation of these supplementary estimates, you and your department has generated these changes to government spending. And one of the things we talk about in this committee, it's very critical to us, is the value for money, right? And value for money for taxpayers and program delivery. Can you describe that position?
The value for money is obviously extremely important to everything we do at the Treasury Board, from overseeing $450 billion of expenditures every year to ensuring that we are cutting red tape, and that will include ensuring that Bill S6 goes through committee and hopefully again gets passed by the House on third reading. The financial information in the estimates is presented to support an appropriation bill that seeks parliamentary approval for expenditures that will be incurred throughout the year. And through this supply bill, the government requests Parliament's approval of the planned spending proposals that are detailed in the estimates. As I briefly outlined in my remarks, the SUPS A for this year in 24-25 present $12.7 billion in incremental spending, and that includes $11.2 billion in new voted spending and $1.5 billion in forecasted statutory budgetary expenditures. So I want to highlight that the majority of that funding is through voted expenditures. We will have the opportunity to vote on this funding in the House of Commons.
In recent months, you've also made announcements in regards to improving Canada's information regime. Can you, do we have time? Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I have 2.5 minutes. I'm
Oh,
just
yeah.
coughing,
Okay.
sorry.
Can you, so you and the department have made a series of announcements in recent months. Could you touch upon how you've worked to improve Canada's information regime through these recent announcements?
Most definitely. The information regime that you're referring to is referred to as our Trust and Transparency Initiative. And what we are aiming to do with that initiative is to make more transparent some of the documents of the federal government. And so you will see in the Freedom of Information Act the ability for individuals to have reference to historical records. And what I did in that announcement is to place time periods around certain discretionary exemptions within the statute so that public servants can have reference to those time periods before they provide those documents to the general public or on request for a Freedom of Information.
In your opening remarks, you touched upon the Indigenous community and some of the objectives of estimates and some of the private objectives is including settlements for Indigenous peoples and services. And can you share any details on these objectives and how these new fundings will help in their execution?
Most definitely. You know that our government is very focused on ensuring that we walk the path of reconciliation as laid out in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. And so the new voted spending is for settlements addressing past grievances and historic harms committed against Indigenous peoples, $1.5 billion for federal Indian Day schools and Indian residential schools day scholars settlements, $769 million for water and wastewater treatment, and $633 million for First Nations Child and Family Services. And I could go on, but there are a number of initiatives voted on in the SUPSA.
No?
About 9 seconds, so
Thank you, Minister.
thanks. Mrs. Vignola, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. Minister Anand. My first question, which will deal to the modernization of the Official Languages Act. And would you like me to start over, repeat what I said? You want an update or what? Yes, well, no, that's fine, that's fine. So, the program for implementing this Modernization Act, Credit 1A, $2.4 billion have been invested or have been estimated. Now, 2.4 for 9 million francophones throughout Canada. That's about 27 cents per capita, francophones. And of this $2.4 million, approximately a quarter of that will go to 7,000, 8,000 Anglophones in Quebec. That's 8 cents. So, do you think that this is going to be sufficient? Well, thank you very much for the question. And it's not the only amount of funding that we were going to introduce for the Official Languages program as a whole. We just are going to continue to support both official languages at all institutions will have an obligation to follow the rules. And this is the reason for which this very week I did announce Part 7 of the Official Languages Act. We have an obligation to support official languages in the public service initially, and accountability factors demonstrates quite clearly that our government is taking this obligation very seriously. Both official languages must be supported. A key element of the Act is to ensure that the Canadian population can interact with federal establishments in the language of their choice. Thank you. Thank you. I know a few Francophones in Saguenay, Lac-Saint-Jean, who had to extend their hours of work to answer questions in English from other callers from other provinces. Now, I don't know how many Anglophones outside of Quebec would be able to answer questions in French if they receive these calls. We've seen cuts in various departments. The cuts have been 40%, but services are as motivated as they may be, just aren't getting to, and the public continues that the services offered or the results are quite unsatisfactory. Now, where are you going to cut in all these expenses? Well, thank you for this question as well. If you have some examples, first of all, of where institutionally you've witnessed such circumstances, if you would be kindly inform me of those situations, and I'd like to discuss that within my department. But I do have my officials with me today. We take our responsibilities very seriously. Well, sincerely and without filtering my comments, if I had to discuss this directly, it would have to be in camera, because there is a very negative environment or culture that says that what's going on and that a Francophone would literally lose his job or be harassed by his colleagues. Well, this is the very reason that it's necessary to have these conversations. And if you do wish to discuss the situation or situations with me, I'm very willing to listen. I would like to hear it. I need the context. Part 7 of the OLA gives us an obligation to receive these complaints or situations, and I wish to discuss them with my officials this afternoon. Thank you. WestJet, who were asking for services in French, were just totally ignored. They hire unilingual individuals for the most part, Anglophone. And when can we straighten out the situation in Canada? When can we expect to see that the anglicization of Quebec for all purposes?
Let me know. We'll save it for the next intervention. Thanks.
Comme j'ai dit, tous les
All our federal establishments and institutions have a responsibility and a legal obligation to provide services in both official languages.
Mr. Green, again,
Thank you very much,
back.
Mr. Chair. And I reminisced about being back at this committee. Of course, I also served on the Public Accounts Committee. I'm going to have a question for you that's fairly straightforward. I'm hoping to get a straightforward answer and perhaps even a commitment out of you here today. Minister, the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation is dedicated to advancing public sector performance audit, oversight, and accountability in Canada and abroad. The foundation's work is internationally renowned and supports elected officials to build capacity, share knowledge, and collaborate on issues of mutual interest of government oversight. The impact of their work increases government transparency and accountability, improves government operations, which is an important way to increase public confidence in government. In fact, as a member of the Public Accounts Committee, I had the pleasure of taking their training, and I found it invaluable. The CAAF has been engaged with your government for more than 2 years to seek funding that will allow it to continue its work, but has yet to receive a response. Unfortunately, it's my understanding that if the funding commitment isn't received by the end of the month, the CAAF will have to cease domestic programming. Now, you'll know that they also go to our provincial counterparts to provide support there. The modest funding request from the CAAF would go a long way to improving government oversight for years to come. There's wide support on the ongoing work of CAAF and their request for federal funding. So this is from the Canadian Council of Public Accounts Committee, who represent legislative staff from federal, provincial, and territorial public accounts committees across Canada, passed a resolution asking for federal funding. The Standing Committee on Public Accounts passed a motion recommending that the Government of Canada, specifically the President of the Treasury Board, review the work of the Canada Audit and Accountability Foundation and take steps to provide adequate and stable funding for the capacity building program as part of the legislative oversight bodies. Now, this might be one of the most nonpartisan questions I've had all session, because there is in fact wide support from Liberal, Conservative, New Democrat chairs of the public accounts committees, and of course Bloc members who would be involved in some of the earlier reports as well. And so my question to you, Minister, can you commit today to providing federal funding for the Canadian Audit and Accountability Foundation to ensure that they can continue their important work by supporting legislators and improving government oversight across the country?
Thank you for the question. I recall from previous committee appearances discussing the CAAF and their important work. I'd like to thank them for this work. I do believe in the usefulness of this work, and I've tasked my officials to investigate the funding request that is before us. And I would ask Mr. Matthews if he could elaborate on the work that he is doing with the department to further support the CAAF.
Certainly, Minister. Mr. Chair, thank you. In terms of a quick update, we are aware of the financial situation facing the organization. We've had some preliminary discussions. The organization does already receive funding from Global Affairs Canada, and there's possibilities of funding from other departments and programs. That's to be investigated. I will be having a conversation with senior leadership with the organization in the days to come, and hope to work with them to find a solution on this. At present, key point for me here, Mr. Chair, is Treasury Board Secretariat does not fund this organization. So we are working with other departments and other programs where there may be a better fit to potentially get funding.
Okay, you're aware that by the end of the month, like, they might cease to exist in their ability to provide programming?
I'm aware there's a board meeting coming up that's very important, and that is one of the dates that is driving this, but that
will you have an
be
answer
determined.
to them before the board meeting?
We will be having discussions with their leadership team before the meeting. I can't give you a definitive answer on how those will go at this stage.
Minister, you would acknowledge, of course, the function of public accounts as one of the few nonpartisan spaces to be able to provide oversight, the need to have parliamentary training on that function, why it's important to remain kind of quasi-nonpartisan. What comment do you have to the board members who will be meeting in advance of the dire situation they're in?
Well, the very fact that I've tasked my officials as ministers to look into this issue, to examine across government what we can do, and to speak with the leadership before that board meeting should underline to you how serious I take the work of the CAAF, and there will be more to follow from my officials.
Well, I'll leave that with you in good faith and hope that, of course, you can recognize that work and the importance not only federally but at the other levels of government. And with that being said, Mr. Chair, I'm going to move a motion with the remainder of my time, and then I will speak to the motion as procedurally correct. That as for the usual practice of the House of Commons standing committees, the Standing Committee on Government Operation and Estimates shall not meet during Parliament's summer recess unless the requirements of the 106.4 of the standing orders are met. Now, This has been already provided as a notice of motion, so
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt. We're not in committee business, so you cannot move the motion.
it's already been put as a notice
But it
of
was
motion.
adjourned. Not in time. We adjourned the debate, so
But I've already moved it, so it's alive. It's alive. It's completely in order. I've moved it. You guys filibustered it. It's already on the table.
yeah, you can't just.
I'm going to
reintroduce
challenge
it.
your decision then, Mr. Chair.
You can have the clerk weigh in as well if you wish. if you
I'll
don't
just
believe
challenge
it.
your decision right now. We can skip the clerk. I don't need the clerk. We can just challenge the decision. I still have the floor, thank you. So I'm challenging your decision.
Point of order.
Yes?
Yeah. Well, Mr. Green should know that when debate on a motion is adjourned, there is a procedurally appropriate way of resuming the debate on that matter. But you cannot just demand the immediate resumption of consideration of that matter. You can't just make up the rules. There are rules that guide how committees are supposed to work.
That's precisely what I'm getting at. So I'll challenge the decision.
I agree. Mr. Green, you can't just, there are procedural ways to do it. This is not the way. You cannot just, outside of committee business.
Mr. Chair,
Drop a motion.
you're at the will of this committee, not the other way around. You've made a decision. I'm not going to challenge that decision. Call the vote.
Please do not give directions to the clerk, Mr. Green. I
wasn't.
appreciate this is.
It's through
And
to
keep
you.
your comments to yourself till you have the floor, and you do not have
through
the
to
floor.
you.
And please do not be giving directions to our clerk. Thank you.
Okay, so the question is whether or not to maintain the chair's ruling. Mr. Polowski? No. Mr. Baines?
No.
Mr. Johari?
No.
Mr. Kuzmichak?
No.
Mr. Souza?
No.
Ms.
No, we're in
Block?
favor. We want to maintain his decision in favor.
Yay.
Yay.
Ms. Block?
You have to say into the microphone, yay.
I'm third.
Yay.
I'm subbed out.
Mr. Janis?
Yay.
Ms. Kuzi?
Yay. Yeah, maintaining the decision of the, yeah, thank you.
Madame Vignala?
No.
And Mr. Green?
No. And now I'll speak to the motion. Thank you. Mr. Chair. I think you can count.
3, 3, nays compte, 7, 7.
Okay, so I have a point of order, Chair. You had just articulated the rules. Mr. Green challenged the chair on an obviously correct ruling. I guess I'm struggling to understand what the new reality is now that we've stepped outside of the Green Book and the standing orders. We're resuming debate on what, and are we into debate, or are we like I don't know where we are given that we haven't followed the rules.
Yeah, I'm going to actually confer with the clerk. I find this very odd that we actually have standing orders that we seem to decide we can overrule them when we don't wish
Resuming
to
debate.
follow proper procedures. So just give me a couple seconds, Mr. Generous. Well, apparently we're into a point where,
Thank you.
when you're done,
No, I'm good.
yeah, I'm referring to Mr. Kuzmierczuk. We're into you, committee overruled, and you can introduce your new motion.
Well, I'm resuming debate on it, and
We're not
listen,
resuming debate, Mr. Green. You brought in a new motion.
well, it's the motion that I brought in the last time that you all filibustered, and what we've discovered
Okay,
here.
Sorry,
Hold on, let me interrupt,
What we've
Mr.
dis-
Green.
where
You
are we?
cannot-
What we've discussed. I don't
No,
need
Mr.
editorial
Green, let
on
me
my comments.
discuss.
He's
I
the
have
chair.
floor.
I have the floor.
No, I am the chair. Mr. Green, you tried to introduce a motion outside of committee business. I ruled you cannot introduce a motion outside of committee business under rules. The committee overruled me. That's fine. You're allowed to introduce a motion now. You can't just start
Okay.
making things up that you're reintroducing something. You're welcome to introduce a brand
Sure.
new motion, but we're not resuming a debate.
So you'd like me to
On that.
restate the motion that as per the usual practice of the House of Commons standing committees, that the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimate shall not meet during Parliament's summer recess unless the requirements of the 106.4 of the standing orders are met. And now I'm going to speak to this, Mr. Chair.
Well, point of order, Chair. This motion is not substantially different than another motion that was previously introduced in this committee. Therefore, it's out of order. If you're going to introduce a new motion, it has to be substantially different than an existing motion, or you can move a motion to resume consideration of another motion. But you can't just move a new motion. And if you resume consideration of a previous motion, the person who previously has the floor, has the floor, which would be me. So.
I was going to say the motion is out of order because it has to be substantively different from the one that we had adjourned. You're not reintroducing it. You have tabled a whole new motion, and it's out of order because it's not substantively different.
Well, I'll challenge you on that as well.
You're entering very setting difficult precedents. But go ahead, sir.
Mr. Polonsky, the question is whether or not to maintain the chair's ruling.
No.
Mr. Baines?
No.
Mr. Jawari?
No.
Mr. Kuzmierczuk?
Nope.
Mr. Souza?
No.
Exactly what
Ms.
you
Bloch?
want that follows the rules.
Yes.
And you guys just
So
didn't
Janice?
figure out what that was. Yay to sustain the chair.
Ms. Kuzi?
Yes.
Madame Vignola?
No.
Mr. Green?
No.
So yes pour 3, and nays contre 7, 7.
Go ahead.
I'll try another time. Thanks, Kelly.
Well, you could follow just the proper procedure and have a dilatory motion to resume, and we could
Socialists
avoid all
don't believe
this,
in
but
rules.
If you want to pursue this path, go ahead.
That taking into consideration the House of Commons administration will block times during the summer for technical blackouts when committees will be unable to meet, and that summer is a time when members spend time in their
I
constituencies.
do have a point of order.
Meeting
though.
with their
Could the
constituents,
new or the old
attending
motion be
committee
distributed
events.
in both official languages? or
And
at
the
least
members
one?
of this committee
Actually,
and
both.
subcommittees agree not to meet during the summer recess
I have a
except
point
for
of order.
meetings under Standing Order 106.
Yeah. So my point of order is, could the new or the old or whatever we're debating in this bizarro ruleless framework, could it be distributed so we can at least look at it?
Do you have it in English and French to distribute? Would you send it to the clerk to distribute?
And I'm on the list, I assume.
I have Mr. Genwes, then Mrs. Vignola. Did you wish to start, or do you wish to wait a few minutes to the?
I'd like it distributed, but I'm ready to,
Okay,
to start.
go ahead, Mr. Genwes.
If I put the motion, I still have the floor. I haven't given the floor up. My
Yeah, just on that point, Chair, because it's the same motion, I believe.
It's not the same motion. It's
I believe
different.
I should have the floor because I had the floor and we were debating this motion last. If you're
You called a
resuming
point of order.
consideration
Treating
of
it
the
as
motion,
a same.
can't gain the floor by a point of order.
you're right. I can't gain the floor by a point of
Yeah,
order. But when you
Mr.
remove
Dennis,
consideration on a previous
Mr.
previous
Green,
matter, then the member who
I
had the
believe
floor
that
has the floor.
it is we'll consider a whole new motion because they overruled. But it appeared you had given up the floor when I had asked a question. But
No,
if you wish to
I
speak,
did not.
well,
Yeah, I just wanted to put into light, what's transpired here, which is, the spirit of committees is that the committees direct their own course of action. And despite what I would consider to be the authoritarian instincts of the conservative leader, what we have is a situation where committees are going beyond what are the usual practices of having planning meetings, subcommittees, where all parties, all opposition parties, can determine the course and direction of a committee. To have conservative chaired committees decide unilaterally when and how and what we meet on is an authoritarian instinct that I think goes against the spirit of the standing orders. And what you witnessed in overturning your decision, sir, is a reminder that the committees are at the democratic will of the members of the committee. And so when people go on, and I've seen the conservative bot farms and rage farms online go on and on and on about shutting stuff down, couldn't be further from the truth. Now, New Democrats will stand up to conservatives and all the other cockamamie things that are happening here. We're going to take a position that we work in our constituency as well. When we come to Ottawa, this is part of the job. We come here as legislators, we do that. We've done that for a very long time. Our work, at least for me, is in Hamilton Centre. So when you have people go on a filibuster talking about how they're going on vacation in the summer and in the winter and in March break and they're always on vacation, that's crazy. Because for me, when I go back to my constituency, it's harder work. Now, maybe it's the case that the leader of the Conservative Party doesn't care to hear from Canadians in constituencies, but I'll tell you this, that as a New Democrat, my job is to represent my riding to the capital, not the capital to my riding, not the leader's office to my riding. So I'm very keen to get back and hear how Hamiltonians are facing the struggles that are before them. I'm keen to get very candid feedback about the direction they want to see from this country in the next little while. And, you know, like if there had been courtesy provided in other situations that would have included other parties in the decision-making and the direction, we wouldn't be here today. And we're in a minority government, despite whatever fantasy world Pierre Poilievre or Andrew Scheer, whoever wants to live in. I'll tell you this, Mr. Chair, that still at 40%, 60% of the country doesn't approve of the direction that the Conservative Party wants to take the country in. This is a minority government. Every committee is in a minority situation. It requires support from the other two opposition parties when you want to go in a direction. It's not the call of the chair. That's why we put these frameworks in place. The 106, to me, is the democratic way to recall a committee. It is the way in which you can find a willing partner in any of the other parties to decide the direction. But I'll tell you what, if the Conservative caucus can't find another party to cooperate on the direction of a committee, then it doesn't have a mandate to go in that direction. Pure and simple. Just as it was experienced here, whether it's regular or not. I'm under no illusions that any of the common courtesies are going to be adhered to in any potential future fantasy land of a conservative iteration of government. I'm not naive. I know what to expect. But it doesn't mean I'm just going to accept it. So from that position, I just want to say, look, we're ready to work as we do in the House of Commons here in Ottawa with our job, back in our communities over the summer, and should a situation occur that merits investigation, I think it would be preposterous for anybody in the Conservative caucus to think that there's some kind of Bloc Québécois NDP cabal. We've been accused of a lot of things. I don't know that we've ever been accused of that. So if you can't find a willing partner in either of the other opposition parties, then you're on your own. Pure and simple. You know, the stuff that I see online and I hear about it in my own committee in ethics, the vitriol and abuse and fortunately for me, I mean, I'm from Hamilton, so we got thick skin. But I'll tell you, if for the people that are watching, if you have any other illusions that, you know, committees somehow ought to operate as though the Conservatives have a majority, that's not the case right now. I can't tell the future, but I can tell you right now that's not the case. So I'm here to put the Conservative caucus on notice that if they want to, if consider it a notice of motion or a dilatory motion, Mr. Chair, have the chuckle. But I promise you this, if you guys want to use your powers arbitrarily to call meetings without consulting with any of the other parties, it's going to get adjourned. It's going to get adjourned because we can count. We can count the votes in the room. And this is still a minority situation. So that's why I came in here fired up today. Kelly, I got a lot of respect for you, my friend. And I know that you just take, I know that you take, I know that you take your orders from the leadership like the rest of your caucus. I get it. But at the end of the day,
Point of order. Yeah.
Mr. Jonas?
Yeah, the member is now disparaging the chair and his.
Not at all. I
his
just said I have
roles.
respect for him.
Yeah.
Let the Hansard show I have respect for
Yeah,
him.
let the Hansard show that you said I have respect for you, and you don't fulfill the functions of the chair properly. You take orders from somewhere else. That is not
that's
respect.
not a point of order.
That is no. It is a point of order. The standing orders have established rules around decorum, and that's a violation of that decorum.
Kelly, I apologize.
That's fine. Can you
Continue? Yeah, I know that after me it's going to be your guys, so
Yeah.
I'm going to get everything.
Oh, sorry.
Rappel au règlement.
Madame?
Point of order. If we were 7 or 8 francophones around the table, all talking together simultaneously, and 2 anglophones, because nobody could understand what was going on, this would never fly. And this is what I've been putting up with for the last 15 minutes. So please, I have the courtesy of putting up your hand if you're going to intervene, and quit cutting in. It'll be a lot easier for you, and it'll be a lot easier for us, and for anybody who may be listening, or who are witnesses or audience here in the room. Thank you.
My apologies. Mr. Chair, I do have a question while I have the floor about our resources. How long do we have resources for?
6:30.
Till 6:30? Okay. I'm going to say at this moment, I'm going to move to suspend this meeting. Thank you. Why?
It's not a motion.
Mr. Jonas, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I did want to start by making a comment with respect to the rules of committees and how committees abide by the rules. And Mr. Green and I actually first met at a debate hosted by the Catholic Archdiocese of Toronto. So I think he'll appreciate if he did sufficient prep for that debate. Reading this section from the great play A Man for All Seasons about St. Thomas More, in which William Roper, Thomas More's rather eccentric son-in-law, says to the future saint, "So now you give the devil the benefit of law," to which Thomas More replies, "Yes, what would you do, cut a great road through the law to get after the devil?" To which Roper replies, "Yes, I'd cut down every law in England to do that." To which More famously replies, "Oh, and when the last law was down and the devil turned around on you, where would you hide, Roper, the laws all being flat? This country is planted thick with laws from coast to coast, man's laws, not God's, and if you cut them down and you're just the man to do it, do you really think you could stand upright in the winds that would blow? Yes, I give the devil benefit of law for my own safety's sake." An important reflection, I hope, for members as they consider whether or not it is wise and judicious to show shameless disregard for the long-established rules of parliamentary committees simply in order to achieve the objectives that they want. Members who think that overruling those rules through constant challenges to the chair is going to be in their long-term interests are fooling themselves. They should understand that adherence to the rules, be they certainly man's rules and not God's, to quote the play, nonetheless is what preserves us in our roles as members of Parliament and our ability to fulfill our functions. Mr. Chair, where are we right now? We have Minister Anand, who I don't always agree with, but I certainly appreciate being able to ask questions to, a very busy minister, as all ministers are, who has come before this committee to answer questions for merely 1 hour, and I would have hoped we would have had the opportunity to ask questions about the work she is doing as Minister of the Treasury Board. And instead of allowing those questions to proceed, we have a member of the NDP who is on a crusade to get parliamentary committees to work as little as possible. If anyone wants to know what are the animating causes that Mr. Green is excited about,
Sorry, Mr. Janus, let me interrupt for a second,
I'll sit
please.
back.
Mr. Kuzmirchuk?
If I can just ask him to lower his voice and volume and step away from the microphone. We want to look after our interpreters and translators.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it, Mr. Kuzmirchuk, but we said before, if there is an issue, whether it's too close, too loud, microphone or earpiece too close, the translators will let the clerk know, and then we will interrupt.
We just don't want to repeat, Mr. Chair, of what happened in the House, so we're very
That
sensitive
was
to
a
that.
completely different situation, but I appreciate that, Mr. Kuzmirchuk. Go ahead, Mr. Janus.
Thank you, Chair. And if there were any problems with the sound, I'm happy to start from the top. Is there any? Okay? I have assurance from my francophone colleague here that it's not necessary for me to start from the top. So I'll continue. If the people of Hamilton would like to know, what are the animating causes for Mr. Green? What are the things that he gets up in the morning thinking about when he decides which issues to prioritize? I know some members come to Parliament and they think they want to focus on economic issues. Some members come to Parliament and they want to focus on social programs. Some members come to Parliament wanting to focus on foreign policy issues. Mr. Green comes to Parliament and he thinks, how can I create a situation in which members of Parliament have to work less? He is going from committee to committee. This isn't even his regular committee. He's not a regular member of OGGO. He is going from committee to committee, moving motions designed to reduce the workload of members of Parliament. This is his mission. This is what has brought him here, Mr. Speaker. He has come to Parliament in order to reduce the workload of members of Parliament. He is putting forward motions at committee saying that whatever happens, whatever the circumstances, chairs cannot
I'm going to
convene
interrupt
meetings.
for a sec. I'm hearing lots of chatter back and forth. Can we please, Mr. Janus has the floor. Let's just leave that with him, please.
Thank you, Chair. His motions are proposing that whatever happens this summer, whatever the circumstances, that committees cannot be brought back to do their jobs over the summer. I can tell you, I think that Canadians would expect something very different. Canadians would like to see members of Parliament working hard through the summer. Yes, going to constituency events, but
Rappel
also
au
being
règlement,
prepared.
s'il vous plaît, Monsieur le Président.
Sorry, Mrs. Vigneault.
Je vous
Well, thank you for giving me the floor for a moment. I find this very offensive to hear a member of Parliament indicate that another member of Parliament doesn't want to work. It's very insulting for this colleague, whereas he is saying expressly that those weeks for constitutional work is still work. Now, my writings people, they know I'm working. This doesn't matter. I will not accept that anybody will say I don't work in the summer.
The point, Mr. Janus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, with great respect, I would just say there's more virtue in telling the truth than in being offended. This member, Mr. Green, has it is a matter of public record, gone from committee to committee, proposing the same motion. It is a motion to say that parliamentary committees cannot convene over the summer. And we do not support this. We believe that the work of Parliament should continue.
Mr. Green, please. When you have the floor, you can speak. But please, okay, Mr. Green. I'm tired of the talking over. There's too much disorder here. I'm adjourning.